It is officially winter, and even though we're all taking precautions, it is high cold and flu season. Staying hydrated properly is key to helping your body deal with all this stress, and nothing has worked better for myself, my family, my patients than Hydralyte, the amazing rapid rehydration drink mix you've heard me talk about for quite some time. I've been obsessed with it. Also, in time for cold and flu season, they have their latest formulation, Hydralyte Plus Immunity. It's become a huge favorite around this household. Hydralyte Plus Immunity starts with their fast-absorbing electrolytes and a host of great ingredients. Each single serving, easy to pour drink mix contains 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 300 of elderberry extract. They've created a great tasting formula that's high in antioxidants and zinc. Remember, zinc's very important for the immune system. They've combined this with Hydralyte's 7 key electrolytes, making this a fantastic way to stay properly hydrated. Hydralyte Plus Immunity comes in convenient, easy to pour powder sticks that rapidly dissolve in water to make a great tasting drink that has 75% less sugar than your typical sports drink. It uses all natural flavors. It is gluten-free, dairy-free, caffeine-free, non-GMO, vegan. Hydralyte Plus Immunity is also now available in ready-to-drink bottles at Walmart next to the pharmacy, or as always, you can find it by visiting hydralyte.com/Dr. Drew. Again, hydralyte.com/DRDREW. And be sure to use the code Dr. Drew 25 at checkout for a special discount.
Hey everyone, it's a dose of Dr. Drew.
It is indeed. I want to thank my friends at Hydralyte. Boy, there was a couple nights ago where I was doing pretty poorly, and Susan said, "You need to hydrate." And I went, "You're right."
I got the new elderberry today. I'm drinking it right now.
All right, we'll have some. And I took literally 4 liters of fluid and 7 sticks of Hydralyte, and damn if I didn't feel better afterwards. So thank you for that, Susan. Thank you for that. Hydralyte.
Actually, it was Joe Giannotti. He mentioned it. He said, "Hey, Dr. Drew, go drink your Hydralyte," and he was right.
We're going to have our friend Kelly Victory in here just a second.
Well, actually, she's here.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you can't see her?
I can't see anything.
I'm sorry.
And the theme for the show is do what you can not to get this thing. That's my basic theme. And by the way, that's why I like this. You can swab your nose and do. Susan, are you doing this? The Halidine?
Well, after this.
Okay, because it does reduce
drinking my coffee here.
These viruses get into our nasal pharynx. They like to reproduce there. Once they set up shop, that's it. But you can do things to knock them out. So, all right. So having that's my little plug for the day. And also, obviously, I'm UV-seeing my bedroom right now. This is my first day really out of bed, and it's a miracle. We changed the bedclothes on my bed. We're really washing the sheets and everything, and we're UV-seeing the entire damn room. All right, Kelly.
UV-seeing?
UV-seeing. Dr. Kelly Victory, thank you for joining me. It's good to have you here. Thank you for being here.
Hey, great to be back, Drew, and Happy New Year. Sounds like you've had a pretty eventful last couple of weeks.
I was in essentially encephalopathic, so I don't really know what the hell went on, most of it. So it was something. It was quite. As Marcus Aurelius has a famous quote I put out on Twitter, is essentially, "I'm glad this happened to me and not someone else, because I understand what's happening and I can now use this to maybe help other people." And that's sort of my new goal, is to try to give my perspective, and that's why I was anxious to talk to you, because I want to. I don't know. I want us to think about it together. And it's just, first of all, how bizarre is it that physicians can't talk publicly without silence, without being silenced? It's just the most bizarre thing I've ever imagined. And I was lying there in my stupor. I was thinking back when I was working in the psychiatric hospital and new medication would come along. The psychiatrist would immediately use it in 100 different settings, way before the literature got there to substantiate what they were doing. I remember Prozac, they started immediately using it in eating disorders and bipolar disorder. It didn't have indication for any of that, but they were trying to help their patients. And the literature came in like 5 years later. Right. What has changed?
Well, one of the things that people don't understand, and lay people don't understand, is that once a medication is FDA approved, it's gone through that process of safety testing to determine, are there any untoward side effects, that sort of thing.
Yeah, can they bring it to market? That's all.
Correct.
Not what doctors do with it. Can they bring it to market?
Yes. Once the safety is determined, then whether or not a doctor prescribes it for indication A or something else doesn't matter. The safety profile is a safety profile. So you are absolutely right. When we look at medications, 80+% of all prescription drugs are prescribed for more than one and are used what we call off-label all the time. We have blood pressure medicines that we use for migraines. We have anti-seizure medications that we give for chronic pain. We have, things all the time. We use things for an indication for which it wasn't originally written, and that certainly applies to things like hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin and drugs that you and I and others have been talking about now for some months during this pandemic.
What happened there? Let's talk about that phase for a second. So the way I experienced this thing was had the flu, and I would say the flu part was nasty, but not as bad as H1N1. It was, very unpleasant, but, like flu. During that phase, I took ivermectin and doxycycline, and I literally could feel the ivermectin improving things, because I would start to go sort of down, and I'd stabilize when I would take my BID, twice daily dose of ivermectin. If I were to do it again, I took it on day 1 and day 3. I would take it 5 days straight. I would take more.
Well, it's an incredibly safe drug, as you well know. It's used generally to treat parasites. It's used both in human and veterinary medicine. It's used to treat worms, scabies, a variety of parasitic diseases. But we've known for a long time that it has some, number one, very powerful anti-inflammatory properties and some innate antiviral properties. So although the protocols that we've been playing with talk about taking it the way that you have for COVID, taking it on day 1, and then again, a second dose on day 3, I certainly don't see any downside to trying.
Right. Well, I had some nausea on day 1 from probably my second dose of ivermectin, and I think that's what. And I was thinking about taking it for 5 days, but I think that's what caused me to back off a little bit. Dr. Zelenko himself called me and begged me to take hydroxychloroquine. I was sort of unconvinced by the literature on that lately, and I said, okay, I took it. I don't know whether it helped or not. It certainly didn't hurt anything. I did it for 5 days. But so my flu component, and by the way, I was negative for 4 days. I was COVID negative PCR until the 4th day. And I did not infect anyone in spite of having been out in the world with my mask, being careful. The only person I infected, of course, was in lockdown here in my home. I infected my son. So,
but not me.
Which is what we know, based on the data, is that is the number one place, Drew, where people are getting infected. It's not at outdoor restaurants. It's not at sporting events.
I should have been at the beach. I should have been relegated to the sand. That would have been a safer place for me. I couldn't have tolerated it, but it was not safe for my family. Now, thankfully, we have a house where it's compartmentalized and I can stay in my own wing. But my son, God bless him, would bring me eggs in the morning, and every morning I'd hear him come in. I thought, oh my God, he's going to get this thing. I just know it. And he did.
He also sat next to you at Christmas Eve.
But so did a lot of people.
Cleaned up your dishes.
Adam Carolla sat next to me.
He was a cross, but Adam is a cockroach. You know that.
And you don't even know that the people who got it in your house got it from you. I mean, it is the nature of respiratory virus.
He had to, because he's been in quarantine for 9 months. Like, that kid hasn't left the pool house for 9 months.
Well, he's now pissed. Now his leg is like, I was quarantined for this. He's had 4 days of flu and no inflammatory thing. So the inflammatory thing is the treachery of this illness. That's the way I experience it. So the treachery is what follows the flu. So what happened to me on day 4 or 5, I started getting hyperexpanded. I started third spacing fluids. I could tell I was sort of filling up. I was short of breath. I was desaturating a little bit. Not bad, like 94 to 96%. Neurologically, I was out of it. That was an extraordinary thing. Susan would come in and go, can you put your towels in the hamper? I go, I can't understand. Slow down.
I wasn't as bitchy at the beginning, though. I was a little bitchy. I'm a little bitchier today. So. Well,
I understand this has burned you out, and I apologize.
I do. I have, yeah.
But she would literally ask me to do things, and I couldn't understand what she was saying, and then I couldn't sequence it. I couldn't start it. I couldn't sequence it. It was very bizarre. So I knew I was in a new phase. And my physician did a great job. He immediately signed me up for a monoclonal antibody infusion once I got a positive result, and put me on dexamethasone. And the dexamethasone worked within hours.
Well, that's what I was going to say. We know, Drew, that the people who have a rougher go of this is exactly as you're talking about. It's because of the inflammatory component of
and it's the older dudes, well, men too, men more than women, older guys, hypertensive, hypercholesterolemic, metabolic syndrome. That's me. I'm supposed to get this stuff. I got it.
You know
But-
what's
but-
really funny is you're so healthy and you look so healthy and you have all these problems. It's hard to believe.
Well,
Like
that's-
you do everything right. You don't drink. You work out.
As,
you always look good.
As a physician friend said to me, you can only work out and outrun your genetics so much.
Well, you're also a cancer survivor.
That's why we have pharmacology, guys.
Being a cancer survivor too, maybe you know.
Look, my
that's-
calcium score. I have horrible endovascular disease in my family. Horrible, and
And
my
so what people need to understand is that the common thing about all of these different disease processes that you're talking about, diabetes, obesity, hypertension, metabolic syndrome, there's a commonality in all those things. And that commonality is a hyperinflammatory state. People
Yes.
who have those diseases are more prone to and have underlying inflammation. And that's what
Right.
people need to understand.
That's
and
right.
Which is why giving the steroids, the anti-inflammatory drug, is so critically important
Right.
in treating COVID.
And we have a colleague here named Kate Shanahan. She's a biochemist, a family practitioner, and dietary specialist, and she believes that there are inflammatory fatty acids too. We have to really be careful, with we should be using tallow and butter, and that's it, and everything else is pro-inflammatory. So I watch that very carefully. But number two, you're absolutely right, and so one of the ways to attack that inflammation, in addition to, so for me, apolipoprotein and the insulin system is part of that inflammatory mediation. So I avoid carbohydrates, try to flatten my insulin, and I take statin. I take a statin. I take an antihypertensive, and I had a repeat calcium score, which is a CAT scan where you measure what's going on in your coronary arteries. With my family history, both me and my own physician look at my calcium score and go, this is an example of why therapeutics are important. My calcium score is 0.0. And with my family history, that's incredible.
And if you think about the things that I've been talking about with you for months now, with regard to COVID, to decreasing the chance of getting COVID-19 or to having a less rocky course if you do get it, many of them are focused on decreasing inflammation.
Right.
Melatonin, for example, the reason most people are taking melatonin to help themselves sleep,
Yeah.
but we know again that it's got powerful anti-inflammatory properties to it, which is why it's so important. So eating a diet that's anti-inflammatory, as you've mentioned, to avoid those inflammatory fatty acids and things of that sort, are very important to decreasing your risk of getting COVID, or frankly, any other respiratory virus that has an inflammatory component
Yes.
to it.
You know what? When I've been telling people about my little protocol, I've neglected to put my 10 milligrams of melatonin.
Yes.
I mentioned it here on the thread once, and somebody said, "Well, that's
You
a
take
mega."
that every night, anyways.
Well, I usually take 5 or 3. I try to take 2.5 actually, because that's more the sleep dose. But 10 milligrams is the anti-inflammatory.
Can I
dose.
ask you guys a question?
Yeah.
Because I'm a mom and my son has COVID-19.
Yeah.
And I have triplets, and they've as they were growing up, Jordan always had the worst immune system comparatively.
My immune system.
Yes, but here's my question. He has Lynch syndrome. He's been
Right.
having horrible stomach problems for months. He had to stop eating everything except for red meat or like a steak and vegetables every night for the last, I don't know, how long has it been, Drew?
Much better with all that.
No, but he literally was, his stomach was killing him every day, and he had to quit eating everything. So he has a very limited diet. He has no body fat on him, and he also doesn't eat those oils. But my question is, should he go get a complete workup because of
he
this?
had one. He already had one. No, Susan, stop.
I mean, I'm just worried
I
that there's
understand.
something
He's
else
fine.
going on.
No. He's under good care. He's not like you're thinking he is like me, that way you had to convince him to get care.
I don't know. It makes me nervous because
No, he's fine. He's being carefully watched.
I mean,
Believe
he
me.
didn't get sick. He didn't get a fever. He's
fine.
he's eating fine. I have to eat, I have to make his.
Listen. You know how I get. I panic about our kids.
Well,
fine.
I want to ask Dr. Kelly
Okay,
as
go
an
ahead.
outside source because you're his father.
All right, so Kelly, let me tell you what has happened. He's had upper and lower endoscopy. He follows regularly with an internist. He had small bowel.
Yeah, but he wasn't really his patient. He was
had
just doing it as a favor.
He had small bowel bacterial overgrowth. Had a course of rifampin. Had some post what do you call it, CBID, whatever you call the acronym for that. He had some post-irritable bowel following it and stabilized. And he has my genetics and got this damn flu.
Lynch syndrome.
And he's known genetically to have Lynch syndrome, which is why they're doing all the endoscopies and things on him. But he's had full workup by an internist and followed carefully and has been doing great lately until he got sick with COVID.
And so let me ask you, because of his Lynch syndrome and his underlying gastrointestinal issues, is he already taking an H2 blocker, something like Pepcid?
He was. He takes it intermittently, and he's using bulk, and he's trying to adjust all that stuff.
He just started the bulk, and that
So
seemed to
he's
help.
already taking Pepcid famotidine, which is one of the medications that we recommend to prevent and to treat COVID. Already having nothing to do with him having COVID, but because of his underlying issue. And if he has inflammatory bowel, is he taking any other antispasmodics or anti-inflammatory medication?
He was taking. I'm sorry, I can't think. My brain is really not right, but he did take something briefly, but didn't really do much. The main thing has been just realize he himself has been saying, I've noticed my anxiety stirs this thing up, and if I'm not so anxious and take some bulk and watch my diet, I'm pretty good.
And we know that fundamentally, even with that underlying medical condition, which isn't a known risk factor, incidentally, for COVID,
right?
Young, he's healthy, he's otherwise, young people really do very, very well with it. We know that based on the CDC numbers, if you're under the age of 50, your chance of succumbing or having a really bad outcome from COVID is minuscule. It really is. Just not to say that there aren't some people who get quite ill, but the reality is that your risk of becoming significantly ill is like 0.02%.
Right.
We're talking
that is
with influenza.
That is one of the messages I feel the public health messaging has missed entirely, which is if you're young, it's nasty, you're going to be fine.
I know. Why didn't they get to stay at work?
But if you're older, you need early, aggressive treatment and careful management. And why we aren't educating people how to do that is disgusting to me.
And so
I'm very upset about this.
I agree. I'm angry about it, and I have been for months, because this has been an opportunity for us to, number one, focus on all those things that we know will enhance the function of the immune system, everything from vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, adequate sleep, good nutrition, regular exercise, all of those things, losing weight if you need to. And instead, we have focused only on these mitigation procedures like social distancing, mask wearing, limiting, closing schools, limiting capacity in bars and restaurants, things that are known to be really questionable whether or not they have any impact at all. And we can disagree about those things. But the tragedy, Drew, is that our focus on those things and the lockdown in general has taken us away from really looking at and hammering on those things that we know do make a difference. And I think that that's really the great tragedy in this entire pandemic response.
Well, and I completely agree, Kelly. And one of the issues for me is coaching up the risk population, people over 65 with metabolic syndrome or whatever, to understand that don't go to the emergency room.
Right.
Telemedicine is alive and well. You can do this whole thing over the phone and through Zoom, no problem.
Get on the ivermectin.
Don't go to the ER. Get early aggressive treatment. And if you don't like what the doctor's doing, find another doctor online. Number one. Number two, know the difference between the flu part and the inflammatory part. And when you get to the inflammatory part, work with your doctor carefully. The steroids for me kept me out of the hospital. And then the bamlanivimab, which was a monoclonal antibody, which they literally can't get rid of now. Susan showed me an article yesterday. Remember that article you showed me on Twitter? Where they said that there's backlogs because they can't get doctors to prescribe it. It was massively changed the direction of my illness. During the infusion, I was sort of reporting to the infusion
He wants
nurse.
another one.
I do want another one. I would happily take it. Apparently, Howard Stern this morning said that only rich people can get this. No. Medicaid, Medi-Cal, everybody. My infusion nurse said he spends all day in poor people's houses, middle-class houses. It doesn't matter. You just apply for it through CORAM, C-O-R-A-M, and During the infusion, I said, "Look, I'm just going to report to you what's happening to me, but colors are getting brighter. I'm feeling stronger sitting here." And he goes, "I hear that all day. All day he hears that from COVID patients."
Well, what's interesting, Drew, is that the patient, it really depends, your outcome depends entirely on where you happen to be when you get sick. And that shouldn't be the case.
Mm.
It depends on what state you're in and what city you're in or what hospital you go to. I have the opportunity to treat patients around the country. I have medical licenses in multiple states. I recently treated some people in the state of Florida where it's no big deal whatsoever to call in a prescription for ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine and zithromax and those sorts of things. California, on the other hand, California has made it almost impossible. Similarly, in Colorado and New Mexico, places where it is patently absurd that I, as a physician, can't easily write a prescription for an FDA-approved medication.
So weird.
These medications have been FDA approved for 6.5 decades. It's not
Isn't
like
that
we
weird?
have,
So Kelly, I have a question. Drew got the fever the first day, and we took a rapid test that morning. And then what's it called, Drew? The one that goes up your nose a little farther?
PCR.
And it came back negative the next day. He had a full-on fever, and he still took the ivermectin and the hydroxychloroquine and the doxycycline.
Well, and also, Kelly, at that point, I was thinking to myself, I either have acute lymphocytic leukemia, or I have COVID, or I have the flu, a bad flu. And I thought, if I have the flu, this is going to suck because I won't get immunity against COVID. And if I have ALL, well, I'm going to get a bone marrow biopsy in the morning.
Okay, you didn't think of that until 3 days later. But anyways, because you're so out of it. But anyways, I was like thinking as a normal person, this was a Friday on Christmas Day, so we really couldn't do another test till Monday. If you have to wait 3 days for your test to come back to get your doctor to prescribe you the medications that are prophylactic or just the protocol, and you can't do it for 3 days, if you wait those 3 days, you're screwed. You have to go to the hospital and convince them, or you have to find somebody who's willing to take the risk, give you the drugs, and decide whether, because we took a flu test too on Monday, because I said, if you don't have COVID, let's find out if it's the flu.
Yeah.
So that was one of my questions was, did you get tested for the flu? So
I did.
But you're making my point precisely, Susan. My friends who are in Florida, one of them did get COVID over the holiday, went to an urgent care, got a rapid test, got the results back within 15 minutes, and left that urgent care with a prescription for hydroxychloroquine, prednisone, zithromax, Pepcid, all of the proper medications, as opposed to people who get tested in Colorado and they say you'll have the results back in 3 to 7 days.
Yeah, that's no good.
Well, you've now wasted your entire window for early treatment, because if we've learned nothing else during this pandemic, we know that the only way these work is if they are given early.
No, I get it.
If someone's in the hospital and needs to be on supplemental oxygen.
Goal is to keep people out of the hospital.
Right.
What are we doing?
I know.
We have ways to do this. And by the way, we can keep them out of the hospital and out of the emergency rooms, both. The public health officials should be, their job should be to educate about this, should it not?
And it's been quite the opposite. Not only are they not educated about it, they have tried to censor, shut down, character assassinate people like myself who've used these medications from the beginning. You look at countries like India, Drew, they are handing out a brown paper bag to every citizen with chloroquine and zithromycin in it, or ivermectin. They are handing these things out. It's dirt cheap. They're well tolerated. It's $2 a patient to hand it out to every citizen. In most of the world, hydroxychloroquine is available over the counter, the way we buy Tylenol.
Yeah, it's just so crazy. But I just think that if Drew had waited till Monday, he would have been in the hospital.
Oh, absolutely.
You might not be here speaking with me.
100%. 100%.
And he's not privileged because he has a good doctor who let him do it. And he's a little privileged because Dr. Zelenko called him and Dr. Yo. But we have good friends,
No, people like Dr. Zelenko have been on the cutting edge. God love him. He is, like me, been heavily censored. In fact, his Twitter account is now been irrevocably.
Yeah, we know. But that was more of his political views too.
But it really is insanity. There are people out here have been trying to talk about this, and
Now,
I do
I
believe
mean, fortunately, Drew picked up some hydroxychloroquine early, like before it was banned, and he had it. You know, he didn't have a lot of it, so. And I was like, should I be taking that as a prophylactic? And he's like, well, be careful, you know, save it. I'm going to take it. So, but I took the ivermectin and it made me nauseous and I didn't want to do that again. But it did, maybe that helped me, you know, we don't know. But the fact that he had it on his, you know, available for
well,
this
I think, yeah,
emergency.
the most important thing for people to know is that, and I've never been a virus denier, despite what people have said. The important thing for people to know, though, is while this virus can be very, very serious, and we know that many people have become profoundly ill and have died from it, we have a growing number of medications that are very effective for this virus that can be used early. They are dirt cheap, they're safe, and why we are not focusing on that, I think, is a real disservice. In fact, I think it's malpractice. There are certainly hospital systems in California that have as a policy that they will not give these medications. They will not give ivermectin. They will not give hydroxychloroquine.
Does the
And that,
hospital start with a K?
oh, there are multiple. There are multiple ones. I can tell you right now. I don't mind. You know, Loma Linda. I had a patient who went to Loma Linda, and actually the physician who saw him there said, "I am a great fan of Dr. Kelly Victory. I believe everything she's saying, and I can't give you the medications. Go home and get them outpatient."
Yeah.
And actually sent the patient out and
That's what
said,
we heard. That's what we heard from another patient that we knew. And
this same thing was happening down in the desert in Southern California,
it's just
where the
insane.
hospital has a policy not to give hydroxychloroquine or ivermectin. And at some point you say, for what reason? At what is the benefit of waiting until people are profoundly ill, then bringing them in the hospital and trying medications like remdesivir or Regeneron or whatever else, but avoiding the medications that have been around for forever, like
Yeah,
ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine? It just defies logic to
I
me.
know. It just drives me nuts.
So, sorry, I'm burning out a bit.
I love how much information you get out in like such a short period of time. That's why you're good at radio. How's your radio show going?
Radio, it's good. I mean, it's 5 days a week. It's been all things COVID every day. And I keep saying at some point, believe it or not, people, at some point, this is going to be behind us. And I'm hoping that we can start talking about some of the other important things. You know, there are always health issues that we can be talking about that are timely and cause people great concern. One of, again, as you know, what I keep referring to is COVID lateral damage. One of the tragedies of this pandemic is that we have failed to treat people early for all of the other things that people come down with, whether it's hypertension or cancer, diabetes. All of those things are being ignored right now. People are having huge delays in their ability to access care for things. We're seeing people with worsening renal disease, heart disease, diabetes that's out of control because they are afraid to go to the doctor's office or they're afraid to avail
Right.
care at the ER. And
Well, the mental health stuff is just
I
just,
think
uh,
Drew is fading on you, Kelly. So Mark McDonald, MD, he's a clinical psychiatry and medical legal expert that Drew found is going to come on tomorrow.
I saw a thing on Twitter where he said we are collectively in a paranoid psychosis, and I thought
That's
that is
Americans are
right.
suffering from mass
It's a
delusional
really
psychosis. So we're
it's
going
a
to have
really
him.
interesting construct, and I thought I want to hear more about this.
well, as you know, I teach a course on leadership in times of crisis. And one of the key pieces of that body of information is that we make really lousy decisions when we're in a place of fear.
Yeah.
Fear is the most dangerous place for you to be when you're trying to manage yourself or others in a crisis. And I agree with him that we are in a collective psychosis of fear and panic. And it's time for people to stop cowering. And part of my job as a public health person is to simply talk facts, not fear. Say not that the virus isn't real or not that people can't become ill with it, but to say
That Drew
let's
couldn't get it.
Or that Dr. Drew, that people, that famous people can't get it. But let's not let our fear and our panic and our paranoia get out of control or out of proportion to the actual risk that
And I'm
we.
finding it's mostly millennials. It's the younger group because my kids were just so fearful of it. And then now Jordan's like, Jesus, this all I stayed in the pool house for 9 months. By the way, a shout out to Dr. Yo. He's in the hizzy today. Can you say that him there, Drew?
I did. I wrote something to him. There he is. So Kelly, a couple things. Yes, and yes. I want to talk a little vaccine because here's my basic note is if you're in a risk category, you don't want this thing. You don't want it. You need to do what you can to mitigate your risk, not cower. And by the way, as I look back at my own sort of rhetoric across the last 9 months, when I think back to last February, what was getting me was the press was demanding that we form our public health policy around the behavior of the communist government of China.
Correct. Right. As you know, the original video that I made early in this pandemic was censored and removed from YouTube and Facebook and everyone else for the sole reason that I was making statements that were out of line with what the Chinese Communist Party was saying. And I'm thinking, really? Okay, since when is that our barometer for...
Right, and that's why I kept saying, just listen to our CDC. Listen to Anthony Fauci. I know you have issues with him, but I thought, I've been behind him for a lot of different pandemics, and let's just listen to this guy and don't pay attention. Stop thinking about China. Stop thinking about Italy. They botched it as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, right.
We'll do better. But we demanded a communist government ethos to this whole thing, and here we are. How's it working in LA County, where we have the highest degree of lockdown and stringent closures, the worst outbreak in the world?
Right. And so if you look at places that didn't do that or aren't doing that now, you look at states like Texas and Florida, who have 50% of the deaths per capita from COVID that places like California and New York have, despite the fact that California and New York had the most draconian of the lockdowns. And so what we know, based on the data, is that lockdowns simply are not working to stop the spread of respiratory viruses, as we should have predicted that they wouldn't work.
That's right.
And so we should have, from the very beginning, been rallying around that high risk category, those people primarily over the age of 70 or 75, and those people who have the underlying comorbidities. And rather than doing that, we acted as if everyone is at equal risk, that children are the same risk as older people, that healthy people are at the same risk as people with comorbidities. And so we instead penalized 100% of the population in order to protect a tiny fraction of the population.
I got to tell you, the one vivid emotional experience I had lying there in my stupor was, I will take this bullet. I'm glad this is happening to me. But the thought that other people are out there losing their businesses, losing their jobs, miserable unnecessarily, was almost more than I could take. I was thinking, hey, I'll take this bullet. Everyone else got to navigate their life and be mature and avoid this thing. You don't want it, but move on, everybody. Let's live. I want you to live. I'll take the bullet. I got it. But the fact that I'm taking the bullet and people weren't living their lives, very emotionally disturbing for me as I laid there up sick. Really upsetting.
And that's exactly right. We have, as I said, we have penalized 100% of the population. We've done so much more harm from the lockdown by an order of magnitude. We have destroyed the lives and livelihoods of hundreds of millions of people.
I just think about you. For me, the model is, I just think about Disneyland here in Southern California and all the businesses and hotels and restaurants around it, and all the people that worked. And it makes me, I want to.
If you look at the numbers from COVID, Drew, the UN has predicted that an additional 230 million people, 250 million people, are predicted to die of starvation globally as a result of the lockdowns and disruption in food chains. Think about that. Those are staggering numbers. Our role in public health is to look at all health, the health of the entire population, not a single disease process, in this case, COVID-19. We have breached our duty. And I'm telling you, history will not look back fondly on this response.
Shouldn't. I hope you're right, because it shouldn't,
Yeah.
Kelly. But let's talk a little vaccine for a second, because I think we're gonna differ a little bit on this. Maybe not. Maybe not. Let's think. So I want my now, as a patient and a risk group, I can tell you personally, I would rather have taken the risk of the vaccine than having to deal with what I'm dealing with in terms of this illness. I understand the risk of the vaccine is not zero. I understand it's not a risk-free intervention. I understand we're doing a large-scale study on a massive population without full data. Well, but that's always the way it is with vaccines. I also understand that the endpoint of not getting severe COVID is what we're preventing. We're not preventing COVID. We're preventing severe COVID, which I didn't get. I got moderate COVID. My immunity now, I just had it measured by a group called Aditix score, and it turns out my humoral immunity, the antibody response, is broader and more intense than the vaccine is providing, which I love, and it makes me feel very reassured, and I dig that. But I'm going to monitor it every month, and when my humoral immunity, meaning my antibodies, start to drop in 4 to 6 months, if I don't have a good memory cell function, CD8 function, helper T cells, all that stuff, I want to take a vaccine. Okay, because the idea of getting this again makes me want to jump off a building. Okay,
No,
so,
and I think you're thinking about that reasonably. It
Okay.
is always a risk benefit calculation.
Right.
So what I would say is, for people under the age of 70 who are healthy, or if you have no underlying medical risk, it would be a toss-up, because the risks are not insignificant from the vaccine itself, because it has not been tested on huge groups of people who have underlying autoimmune disease, people
Right.
who have existing antibodies. Lots of groups of people have not been tested yet, so it is very experimental at this point. That said, people who fall into those risk categories, which would include you with your underlying condition,
Absolutely, 100%. What happened to me is what's supposed to happen to me. It's what
Correct.
happens to people like me.
Now, the good news is, we are seeing in the patients that we are following who got COVID early on, back in February, March, and April, we are still seeing very high levels of antibody.
Yes.
They are sticking around. So we are seeing antibodies last upwards of 9 months. That's as long as we can test so far, because we haven't known. But right now we are seeing good antibody responses, and have every reason to believe that people will maintain their immunity to COVID after having had it, like you have, for certainly 10, 12 months or more. So I think that that's the good news. And the immunity that people are getting from having had the disease itself and surviving it seems to be significantly better than the immunity that people are getting from the vaccine.
A friend of mine got a second case. He never tested positive, but he tested positive for antibodies for a sustained period of time, and then the antibodies went away, and then he got sick, and that freaked me out. And so,
So you're going to get the vaccine.
well, I'm going to get Aditix score
But you're
every
not going to
month.
go to the hospital without like full PPP gear on, right?
Because I have PTSD from this illness. I just that thought
I think
of it
that
again.
cloth mask you're wearing is not good enough.
All right. So let me just, my brain, please.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt
this
you.
is my brain part. I can't.
No, your friend got it and then lost the immunity.
Right. That was
and then-
Kevin from Kevin and Bean. So I called him. He told me a story, and I thought, man, I'm going to follow my Aditix score. And I called Aditix. I said, let's do this on a regular basis.
So how can other people get the Aditix?
Go to Aditix.com. Please put the website up. Put
I
up
did.
Aditix score and stuff. And people should be getting access to
I
this
wanna
if
get
they've had the
that.
vaccine, even, because then you can also know your vaccine is adequately active. But
Also,
Kelly,
you
here's
could also go to the Red Cross and donate blood, and they
yeah.
Oh, you
Right,
can
you get
now.
your humoral immunity
plasma.
test. You get, but that's just the antibody part. We're going to be testing the cellular, the CD8, the helper, the memory B cell function. All that stuff needs to be measured as well. But
Can
Kelly,
I get a test too, Drew?
yes, Susan, I'm working on it. But Kelly, here's my question. That's what I'm trying to build towards. Paul Offit, who's a famous virologist, vaccine therapist, impressed me early on, where he said, I'm a little uncomfortable with some of these new technologies. I think we should, be taking the more traditional vaccine therapies. And there is a traditional one that's probably going to come online in April, May. I think it's Novavax. I think they're the people that make the flu vaccine. And I am sympathetic to people wanting to wait for the vaccine. In fact, because I have options now, because I have immunity and I don't have to get the earlier technologies, I can choose which vaccine I want. I'm going to choose that one. What do you think about that?
Well, I can tell you that I meet regularly, as you know, multiple times a week with a group of physicians from around the globe who are on the front line of this pandemic response. And to a person, everyone has said the same thing, that we are all going to wait. If I take a vaccine at all, that everyone who I talk with would like to wait for that new vaccine, which is actually the old technology. It's
Okay.
a
All right.
attenuated virus. To be clear, the vaccines that are being launched currently, the Moderna and Pfizer vaccines and the other ones in the pipeline, are all mRNA viruses. It's a new technology that has never been used before for a human vaccine, where it actually tells your body to start producing spike proteins that are the same spike proteins that are on the outside of COVID-19, in hopes that your body will produce them, those proteins, see it as foreign, and develop antibodies to that spike protein. Never been done before. In the past, we've always used the virus itself, or a portion of the virus, injected that
Well,
directly.
it has been done. It's not been used in this country. Is that more accurate? I think other countries have used an
They
mRNA type virus.
they have experimented with them with not good results. Right? They've had some rather devastating results in the past. So I think people have reasons to have some concern about the current vaccine, and I certainly do, although I am wildly pro-vaccine in general. And as I said, the true anti-vaccine people consider me to be a vaccine zealot, because I've spoken and written so prolifically about the importance of vaccines. But this particular one gives me some pause. And I think that the problem is that they did not go through the testing that they normally would have in order to get it FDA approved. It is being used only under an emergency use authorization, an EUA, and is still an experimental vaccine that we are hoping is effective. And we sure as heck are hoping that it's safe. But there have been not an insignificant number of adverse side effects so far. And so I think I understand why people would want to wait for that new vaccine.
Yeah. But let's be fair, Kelly. But by the same token, you don't want this. You don't want what I just went through if you could avoid it.
Now,
Yes.
these are Kelly's,
Yeah.
this is the way Kelly thinks. Drew thinks differently. So
Do
No, I agree. I agree. If I were advising, if we're talking about me, I'm saying that I, as somebody
Yes.
who's not in a risk category, I have the luxury, if you will, of waiting for a different version of
I
a
think
vaccine.
I do too.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I personally think I could wait too. Even
For
though I'm
what?
probably older than you, but
But if I were advising someone in a nursing home or somebody with significant comorbidities, I might say, look, in your category, in your risk category, your risk of actually dying from COVID is 4 or 5%.
Right.
That's a significant risk, and therefore the risks inherent in this vaccine, experimental as it might be, probably are less than the risk of actually coming down with a severe case of COVID.
Well-
So I do think it's a very much an individual
Yeah.
choice. I'm not
Yes.
Exactly.
That's right. That's
not
right.
suggesting that nobody can take this.
And Kelly, I just, again, my brain, but my perspective is a little different now as a patient. I was, as a physician, very focused on the mortality data. Now, as a patient, I'm looking more at the morbidity data. And, the idea of being a long hauler is extremely distressing. The fact that I'm 2 weeks out, I'm still sick. This is not something anybody should want to go through. You know what I mean? So it's not just that morbidity data. It's that extra 20% or so of people that really struggle with this that I'm starting to worry about a little more now, too. And again, those are the risk populations like myself.
Exactly. And so it's very much an individual decision. There are certainly people who I would absolutely recommend get the vaccine right now so they don't get the virus, because their chance of becoming significantly ill or having long-term side effects is too high. But again, also to be clear, just to make sure that people are clear that this whole long haulers idea, the fact that there are some people who have prolonged, protracted side effects, whether it's to lung, heart, brain from COVID, COVID is not unique in that, Drew, and you know that. Many viruses, particularly respiratory viruses, influenza included.
I've had chronic stuff from H1N1,
Yeah,
which was not even a respiratory virus, really. It was a
right,
flu virus.
right.
Do you need a
Exactly.
Kleenex?
No, it's itching.
And
Itching.
things like Epstein-Barr virus. There are many viruses that have the potential to cause these sort of long-term side effects. So I just want to be clear that COVID-19 is not unique in that.
Yeah.
That's true. The long-term outcome for Drew, who knows?
Well, I every day I get a little better, so I'm assuming I'm not going to be a long hauler. I'm actually starting to look at stem cell therapies and stuff like that, because if I get into a long hauler situation, I'm willing to. Two things occur to me: is this is highly experimental. This is not something I can recommend to people, but whether or not I should get another monoclonal antibody infusion, because persistent viral replication is probably what the long hauler thing is, and whether there's some stem cell data out there that's looking kind of interesting.
Well,
But Kelly, what do you think?
Well, I'm going to give you my opinion on the monoclonal antibodies, although
ahead.
they're really critically important for some people to turn them around.
Turn me around.
But-
It did.
But clear, so people understand when you're getting the antibody therapy, what Regeneron or whatever, a monoclonal antibody therapy, what you are doing is essentially borrowing from someone. If it's convalescent plasma, you're borrowing from someone who had the disease and has antibodies, and you're infusing them into yourself. Or you're getting antibodies that have been created in a laboratory. That's what the monoclonal, what you got. They were antibodies that were created in a lab. When you give them to someone with COVID, you decrease, your body then doesn't need to make those antibodies.
Well, but Kelly, to your point, I thought about that when I was getting the infusion, but also you could make the same argument for dexamethasone. In fact, Dr. Bruce Patterson is believing that some of the suppressed CD8 count he's seeing, which is long hauler syndrome, is from the sustained use of dexamethasone.
Correct. So what I'm saying, so let's go back to the antibodies for a minute.
Yeah.
When you take antibodies in an infusion, you are telling your body sees those and says, oh, great, I got antibodies. I don't need to create my own. Those antibodies that you get in an infusion don't last. They don't stick around because they were never yours in the first place.
Right.
Okay?
Yes.
So they go away. And that's what people need to understand. Those antibodies that you get in an infusion don't stick around. They go
But
away.
I got to tell you, it having that relief for a couple of days, you're right. I got better and then I've plateaued. That's exactly what happened.
Absolutely. But as a result, what we don't know, Drew, is people who get antibodies and monoclonal antibody therapy, do you ever create, or are your antibodies going to, as a result, only last?
What about the stem cell?
Well, but hang on a
situation?
second. I'll tell you. I'll have her answer that in a second. But Kelly, to push back a little bit, that's why I did this immune profiling that I'm doing through this Additics group, and it showed my humoral immunity was exuberant. My own antibody response was broad and intense. So good news. It does not seem to have significant. Now, will it affect my helper function later? That's a really interesting question.
And we just don't know. I'm not saying that
Right.
it was a mistake to take it, and I would recommend. Listen, when you are in the acute phases of it, throw everything at it.
Right.
believe me,
That's what I think.
I'm
Thank
not
you.
suggesting that we withhold treatment of any sort, and that's my point about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin, and throw the whole book at it. But we
For
don't.
not doing that is driving me out of my mind. Frankly.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But we don't know. I mean, the flip side may be that people who end up needing to take those antibodies, like you did, might end up having less immunity. We just don't, there's not enough time. In the same way that when we talk about long haulers, I certainly don't laugh because it's not a laughing thing, but I roll my eyes when people talk about long haulers with COVID-19, because it hasn't been around long enough to know if you've got long, how long it's going to be.
Yeah.
You need some time. So we need to know that people aren't going to have problems from it, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years from now. I'm not worried about someone having some cardiac inflammation for the first couple of weeks or months, some lingering lung inflammation. That happens with lots of viruses.
For sure that happened to me. I had weird rhythm things. My pulse, my fever was 102, my pulse was 88. That was not normal. Then 2 days later, the fever went away, and any exertion, like climbing stairs, my pulse was 120. lots of PVCs. And I thought, well, this is inflammation of my heart. That's what this is. And my lungs. Probably the cardiopulmonary component is probably linked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so I think that there are just an awful lot of questions, and a lot of the questions I get about the vaccine are whether people who have immunosuppressed conditions, or if it's somebody who's got an underlying autoimmune disease,
Yeah.
whether people who are of childbearing age, whether people breastfeeding, and the answer is we have no
We don't know.
idea. And that's the problem with having, there's a reason that the average vaccine takes 4 to 6 years to come to market, if it ever comes to market.
Yeah.
Bringing one to market in 4 to 6 months can only be done by what they did here, which is by skipping all of the animal trials where you would normally uncover some of these problems, and skipping any long-term really testing and follow-up, so that you have some idea what will the impact be on someone who's on immunosuppressive drugs for psoriasis, someone who's on immunosuppressive drugs for any number of things, for an organ transplant. So although they fall into a high-risk category for COVID, they also are in a group of people on whom the vaccine simply has not been tested.
Yep. These are all concerns. These are all real concerns. Don is asking, did I lose taste or smell? I did not lose smell. I lost taste, and I was left with only salty. So everything tastes salty, and temperature, not spice, actual heat, temperature. And so coffee was the most glorious thing in the world for me.
Interesting. Well,
Interesting.
that makes me kind of want to get it, because if I could just have a where chocolate did not taste good and I wasn't really wrong, that'd be a good post-holiday thing.
He didn't lose that much weight though, Kelly. They were all hungry and ate all day long.
In spite of eating, it was weird. I ate a lot, but I don't know that I ate normally a lot. You know what I mean? I probably had like a 5 or 10% reduction in what actual calorie intake, even though I was hungry a lot. I would go for long periods of time where I just was not interested in food, and then I'd suddenly be ravenous.
And he broke down and ate Oreo chocolate chip ice cream.
Yes, I did.
So
you have to remember, when you have that type of an infectious process going on, you are in a hypermetabolic state. You are burning more calories. Having a fever causes you to burn calories, and having that type of infection, you need more calories. So that is being ill with something is not the time to be cutting back and trying to lose.
Every time Dr. Yo would check in with me, I go, oh, he's eating Oreo ice cream again. He goes, God, that ice cream.
Yeah, that was weird. So here's an interesting question for you. So I volunteered at my local emergency room here to work in the overflow department. I've heard nothing from the hospital. They claim they are short-staffed. Here is a senior physician with 40 years of experience offering them free help. They have not followed through. Tells me something about what's actually going on in the hospitals. But I received a letter today from the New York State. I originally applied to be part of Governor Cuomo's physician task force when they were in trouble in the original outbreak, and I went through the interview process. They were about to deploy me, and then the whole thing just died out. But my question is, maybe I should go to New York and start at least work in vaccine distribution or something. Do something where I can be of use as a physician with 40 years of experience who didn't die from this thing.
Inoculation.
What do you think, Kelly? Should I go to New York and work for a few months?
Well, if they actually will take you up on it, no question. I think it can be very, very helpful. I have found the same thing. I have a medical license in multiple states. And despite all of the, what you hear about hospitals being overwhelmed and people being burned out and there's not enough medical staff, I really question some of it because we simply aren't seeing it play out. As you well know, during the initial, the first tranche of this pandemic, Drew, people, including in New York, they outfitted the Javits Center at huge cost.
That's right next to our house.
It's right across from where our condo is.
Well, and it laid empty.
I know. We watched it. We watched it get set up. We watched it sit there and watch it get dismantled. But
that was parked off the coast, sat empty. The Denver Convention Center, it took millions of dollars to outfit it.
But they probably need doctors now. I think you should go to New York, Drew, and do it. Or, screw the Huntington. They're the ones that gave you the virus.
Wait, say that again? Go to New York.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't even call you to give you the shot so that you could come in and work. Like
Not only do they not do that, they stonewalled me. And I still am offering my services. And what is their problem? Do you want to save lives or not? I nearly took a hospital bed. My patients now, I can't care for them to keep them out of the hospital. What is the plan here, people? Is it to save lives or not? If so, every arm should be vaccinated that's held out that wants it.
exactly.
Every doctor and nurse that's available that wants to work should be working. What are we doing? What are we? And the public health department should be educating the public how to use the healthcare system so we keep them out of the ER and out of the hospital. It's so simple. What are we doing?
Right. Well, and that's been my point from the very beginning, that there's something that from a public health perspective, we have not done the things that we should be doing. We've allowed it to become hyper political,
Yeah.
where things like prescribing the most simple medications that have been around forever is frowned upon. And instead, we're pushing brand new medications, which I have no problem with the idea of a new medication.
Yeah.
Remdesivir, for example.
Yeah.
Remdesivir is $3,000 per dose.
But it's helping. All right, I get it.
Required to be in the hospital.
Yeah.
Fine, yeah, I get it. But why would you push that and promote that as the new gold standard, or monoclonal antibodies, while at the same time turning a blind eye to something like ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine and zinc and vitamin D and all the things we know that people could and should be doing to decrease their risks of getting this. The one data point that we know is that people who have vitamin D levels in the normal range, meaning above 30 nanograms per milliliter, if their vitamin D levels are in the normal range, they have a 50% reduced chance of ever getting COVID-19.
Right.
Think about that. So
Right.
you're talking about a bottle of gummies that you can buy at the Ralph's for $12 and take vitamin D every day, because
Yeah.
we know that the vast majority of Americans are vitamin D deficient. So talk about a simple thing people could and should be doing, yet we're not really talking about that.
So here's another question that somebody asked that I wanted to address that I think is a good question, which is, do we have a specific telemedicine? We're telling people to use telemedicine and stay out of the hospital. I work with a group called HEAL that's in many cities. They have telemedicine and doctors that go out to your home, HEAL, or getheal.com. But there are others out there. They're excellent telemedicines, and most doctors will do telemedicine. You could probably just go to a private physician's website and for $50 get an evaluation online, right?
But when it comes to COVID, I would strongly say, because so many physicians are either uneducated about the treatment protocols for COVID, or have been really threatened or otherwise bullied into not using the treatment protocols, I strongly suggest that people go to either speakwithanmd.com.
Yes, that's a good group.
MD.com. They
Yeah.
will do a telemedicine visit, and they are able to prescribe the appropriate medications in all 50 states.
Yeah.
If they feel that you would benefit from whether it's hydroxychloroquine or ibuprofen, whatever. So speakwithanmd.com and America's Frontline Doctors. If you go to, they have a website, which I think is Frontline. Look at Google America's Frontline Doctors, their website. Again, they will do a telemedicine visit and can prescribe the medications.
All right.
I have most people to speakwithanmd.com.
Look at that, $60 for a consult.
Wait, what was the
$60.
last one, Kelly? Because I have ADD.
Is the America's Frontline Doctors, the group that Stella Manuel and Simone Gold and others have been, and Richard Urso.
Is it Doctors, DOCTORS or DRS?
I don't know that it's the website. What I'm saying, Susan, you might have to Google America's Frontline Doctors, because I don't know if they're using an acronym or not.
No, it's full on. It's like it's all spelled out.
But speakwithanmd.com has been terrific. Very responsive, and I have many patients who are unable to get medications where they were, who called me. I've done consults with them where I've referred them there, and they've gotten the appropriate medications in a timely fashion.
Thanks for those, because we done,
It's one word, speak with an MD. I'm recommending it to somebody right now.
Speakwithanmd.com.
Yep.
So also, somebody on the stream was saying that the infusions are through Quorum are only available in 7 cities.
That makes sense, right? It makes sense that it wouldn't be everywhere. So you may have to do some research to find out um, what's available in your
Well, I
area?
can tell you that patients that I had in the hospital in Southern California were not able to get infusions with antibodies. They were told that the hospital is simply not stocking it. They were stocking remdesivir, but not even stocking the antibody infusions, which I think is tragic.
Yeah, yeah. And listen, I have spent half my day with people that I know that are sick, talking to their doctors, and their doctors saying, "You can't get that. That's only available
Right,
in a hospital,
right,
or your insurance won't cover it."
right.
Neither are true. It's
I,
just they have
Medicare covers
more
it.
doses than they can get rid of. There's literally a story that was circulating yesterday that they have a backlog of drug, and they should have a shortage. It's
yeah.
too much. It's too much.
So can I ask Kelly a question?
Yes, please.
This is personal
Okay.
because I gotta go back. I gotta go back in the master bedroom tonight.
Okay.
Um.
I'm on day 12, Kelly.
Okay. Does it? Okay. And Drew, the news said that it doesn't live on surfaces. They found that it doesn't live on surfaces, and I call bullshit. If you cough on it, and somehow my son got it, and Drew didn't cough in his face. I don't know what happened, but what is the chance that it lives on surfaces? I mean,
The
what
virus.
day would you say that it still lives on surfaces?
We've known this for months now, and I was out in the original video I made back in May. I said, stop swabbing the legs of chairs and windowsills in your house. This is ridiculous. Respiratory viruses and COVID-19 is no different, live within a water droplet, and they can live for quite a long time. So in other words, if you cough or you sneeze onto the countertop, or you sneeze with your hand and then touch the doorknob, as long as there is fluid still there, that virus can certainly live within that fluid droplet and does. The issue is that those fluid droplets evaporate very quickly, and the virus on its own does not survive for prolonged periods on a hard surface.
So is it okay if I use the Clorox wipes, which are now available, by the way, after Drew leaves and swab everything down? And am I being paranoid because he's
No,
been
you
schmutzing
certainly-
all over the place?
And let's remind everyone, I'm day 12. Day
Yeah.
12.
Well, first of all, so Drew, after all the medications he's taking, he is no longer shedding
Thank you.
viable virus.
Thank you.
He wants to
change-
shed.
Yeah, you are no longer shedding and out
No,
when you say
shagging, not
viable
shedding,
virus,
Susan.
I mean, it's a virus that's capable of causing disease, capable of replicating, or capable of being transmitted to others.
She got nervous, Kelly, because I had a positive rapid test a couple days ago. I told her I'm going to be positive for a long time.
Yeah, and also we're washing his sheets and stuff, and it's like, is it still in the sheets? We're putting it in the
No.
washing machine. Is it still in the...
No.
This virus is really quite fragile. It doesn't hold up to lots of things. Certainly, your basic household cleaners take care of it.
Yeah.
Hot water and detergent takes care of it. Like every other virus, it simply isn't this super bug that lasts at extreme temperatures.
Okay. Well, I'm glad that you said that because I'm uber germaphobe, Clorox wipe friendly, like
But
crazy.
let's talk about how my son got it for a
But
second.
I don't have it, so maybe I'm doing something right. Okay?
Yeah, good. You're a specimen, my dear.
No,
You're a genetic specimen, and that's just the way it is. That's just we decided last night. It came in through your grandmother. We understand. That's how it happened.
my white trash jeans.
But Kelly, there's an interesting piece here, which is our friend Leopold. Those of you from locals know that he is an environmental engineer, and he's been very focused on aerosolized virus, which is different than the droplet virus.
Right.
And I wonder if when my son came in, and because I was in bed coughing, he would come in and quickly deliver some eggs to me and get out of there with a mask on. Mask won't do that much for the aerosols.
In fact, no. And this is my point about the masks. You and I have differed that the masks really are not good for controlling respiratory viruses. And in fact, Duke University did a study back in August showing that cloth masks, particularly those gator style masks that you see lots of people wearing, actually increase aerosolization. When you cough or sneeze or exhale hard because you're speaking loudly, the respiratory droplet comes out of your lung, hits that mask, and spreads into
multiple tiny droplets. It functionally acts to aerosolize. Cloth masks aerosolize from a big respiratory droplet and spreads it into thousands of little ones. So actually, many forms of the mask do a significant amount to increase the spread of respiratory viruses. It's very
I know Drew wore a mask to the hospital, and I completely agree with you now, because there's no other way, you know.
I got
I mean,
it.
unfortunately, I've been saying this. I wish I weren't the case, but I've been saying from the very beginning, the idea of everyone walking around with a mask on defies what we have known for decades and decades and decades about the spread of respiratory viruses.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
It's just
Well,
so
here's what I like
interesting.
about our conversation today. So much of what you and I have been talking about for 4 months is sort of paying out, right? We think about, I'd urge people, if you did not hear this entire conversation, we covered it all. And there's a lot of information here. We have new perspectives because we're learning things about this damn virus every day. I'm learning as a patient and as a provider. Dr. Kelly is having a lot of her stuff, Dr. Victory rather is having a lot of her stuff confirmed as we moved along here. And I think this was a really, really interesting review today. I feel very good about this. And I hope people learn from it and then take control of their health care and then navigate and live. And if you want to take the vaccine, you don't want this if you're a risk category, so I would urge you to think about that very hard. The fact that your state may not be rolling out the vaccine fast enough is criminal, and you should hold them accountable. They should be throwing the needle into every arm who wants it, if you want it. If you listen to our conversation, you'll see we're both a little temperate in terms of, you know, which vaccine we think is the safest and stuff. But again, it's a risk reward analysis. If you're at risk, you don't want to go through what I just went through. It's worth the risk. If you're 30 years old, not worth the risk.
No.
Right, Kelly?
Right, absolutely. And in the meantime, if you aren't already doing it, after all of these months of us talking about it, if you aren't already doing it, you should be doing those simple things to improve your immune system and to decrease your risk of getting this. Vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, quercetin, and as well as all the obvious things like adequate sleep, regular exercise, stress management. But taking those supplements, which are dirt cheap, easily available, you can get them at Amazon, you can get them at the grocery store, and everyone should be doing that. And that's not just specific, Dr. Drew, to COVID-19. That's specific. I mean, you will improve your chances of getting through every single cold and flu season without a nasty upper respiratory infection simply by doing those things.
Oh, sorry.
That is correct.
I turned it off because you coughed.
Yeah. I was just sitting here thinking.
I was wearing 2 masks all week, by the way. I just want to let everybody know.
And I'm just thinking that you know, I think if you did a CAT scan on my chest, I would probably still have ground glass appearance to my lungs. That's why I'm coughing and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I am still on tapering dexamethasone. I'll be off that in 2 or 3 days, which good.
Then what happens? You have a big letdown and crash? And
no, I don't think I'm going to crash. I don't think so because I'm still.
Do they taper it?
Yeah, I'm tapering.
You should be tapering. And and melatonin, the other thing, we mentioned it earlier in the show, but again, melatonin is something that's simple for people to be taking.
I should take that, huh?
Yes, you should.
Absolutely.
It'll give you weird dreams. GSR Savage, Leopold is doing a lot better. I talked to him yesterday. He was much, much, much better. And
Drew always coughs when he gets sick, though, because he uses his voice, he uses his lungs, and it always attacks his lungs.
And you have an inflammatory, people who have underlying inflammatory conditions.
That's right.
Coughing is an inflammatory issue, and you will continue to cough long after the infection is gone. Yeah. Same thing happens with viral bronchitis. Other respiratory issues. That cough, that lingering cough, the need to clear your throat, that can last for weeks and months. After you are, this isn't a sign that you are still infectious. It's a side effect of the inflammatory response. Right.
And I'm so grateful to be immune right now. I'm so grateful for that. And so I may be going to New York, Susan. We maybe will go to New York and I'll work there for a few months or something. I don't know. We would continue to do these threads and things from our apartment there. But I really am. One of the other thing that happens in this illness is you start reprioritizing everything. You're lying there going, and I told you that emotional reaction of being upset that people were suffering in addition to being sick. That's like mind-boggling when you're lying there sick. I'm a casualty on the field of battle, and people are being lives are being ruined. It's like, God
Right.
damn it, I can't stand it.
I just got a message from Dr. Ramyajendra.
Yeah.
Dr. Yo.
Uh,
Carrie's dad had CXR findings of COVID viral pneumonia and saturation in 94%,
Who?
feeling
Who?
like shit.
Who?
Carrie's dad.
Who's Carrie?
I'm not sure. Wrote him a script for ivermectin, budesonide last night, and he's feeling dramatically better. Her mom
Great.
is now dying in the ICU, and doctors are refusing leronlimab.
Oh,
Say that,
I-
please,
I-
for me.
Yeah.
They
I know
didn't
about that
message
story.
me about it till she was intubated. Midwestern pride prevented me from talking to me, even though they are my closest friends. He's not happy.
No, I know. Listen,
This is what he deals with all day.
I believe me, I every single day have patients who can't get the medications, and primarily because they end up in hospitals. They end up hospitalized, and unless you have hospital privileges there's not a dang thing you
So
can do
crazy.
about it.
So crazy. I mean, try
unfortunately-
anything. What the hell? Just
Right,
do it.
exactly. And we're not talking about medications that are experimental. Again, we're talking about things that have been around for a long time. So
but God bless you, Dr. Yo, for trying so hard.
Oh, yeah, he's doing amazing work. But my cough is worse today. It's weird. I
Yeah.
think I'm doing too much. I think it's the activity.
Well, also you took all the blankets and everything off the bed, so it probably stirred up dust.
No. It feels like I'm like irritated. My lungs are irritated because I've been out of bed. I've been doing stuff
you
I
need
haven't
some more
done.
liquids. How about some
I do need more
Hydralyte?
liquids. You're absolutely correct.
We got the new flavor, the elderberry. We'll see if you like it.
But my point is, I probably should sort of curtail my activity right about now. So
I know we burned him out. We got him, Kelly.
What's that,
He's gonna
Kelly?
Go rest now.
You also are tapering your steroids. So, you may be finding that tipping point where
Yeah.
you may need a longer taper, Drew, than the standard taper.
I agree,
Your-
Kelly. I do.
Your underlying inflammatory
Yeah. Of course.
response.
Of course. And but I am anxious to get off this stuff. I do want my immune system to kick in, and and I am doing all that stuff you mentioned. So let's just review really quickly, which is we're saying vitamin D, follow your doctor's orders. I took 5,000 units a day. Vitamin C, 1,000 to 2,000 units a day. Zinc 25 unless you're sick, and it's 50. Pepsid 40, melatonin 10. Ivermectin 100 micrograms per kilogram, which is about 6 milligrams twice a day. Would you say, Kelly, for an average person?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's something that you can only get by prescription. I recommend people get quercetin, which is easily available over the counter. Quercetin is similar to hydroxychloroquine in that it helps to drive the zinc from your bloodstream into your cells. It's what we call a zinc ionophore. It opens the door, if you will, to the cell that allows the zinc to go in, which is where it needs to be in order to kill viruses. So quercetin, 500 milligrams of quercetin. If you go on Amazon, you can get combination formulations that have both zinc and quercetin. So it's super easy to take as a capsule. So I recommend that as well.
And also, if you get it, stay hydrated with the electrolyte powder Hydralyte.
And I really do believe that do what you do to reduce your risk, which is if it's only a 20% reduction, wear the mask. If it's a 10%, if you have halidine in the back of your nose, it helps reduce the viral shedding. Do it. Do these things. Take the vitamins. And then again, if you get sick, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, that's up to you and your doctor. I took doxycycline. You could take azithromycin. Aspirin, I think, is very important. There's a whole story we could get into in terms of clotting and neutrophil clusters that are causing this clotting, but that's a kind of a technical conversation.
So what about I know you're tired, but the stem cells?
All right, so hold on. Let me just finish this.
Okay.
And then in the inflammatory phase, dexamethasone, bamlanivimab. Use, what's again the website? Talk to a doctor, Kelly?
Speakwithanmd.com.
Speakwithanmd.com. And you can use the, and Susan put up the CORAM website again for people in the cities where they can get the infusion for monoclonal antibodies. It turned things around for me. And then what about stem cells? Let's finish up with that. What do you think?
I'm a huge believer in stem cells for lots of things, but again, talk about something that hasn't been tested. We have, there certainly haven't been any big studies on it. I think it's probably something that's not available to the vast majority of people, which is why I, prefer to really focus on those things that are so
available
to do, including talk about, another thing that's super easy to do, any type of mouthwash that includes
Yes.
cetylpyridine, which is found in,
But
multiple
povidone, it's a good antiviral, antibacterial. Use it.
absolutely.
well that's our actually everybody that is our sponsor, Halodyne. So
The reason they're a sponsor is I talked to the inventor. He's an
we're working on the
ophthalmologist, a
codes in
chemist,
the
a
video
great
'cause Drew's
guy,
been sick.
and he made sense to me. And so I'm
there's-
on board.
You're just talking about decreasing the amount of virus
Yep.
that lives or can take hold in your nose and throat, which again, come back to something simple, hydration.
Yep.
Hydration isn't something that you should do just when you get sick. Part of the way we keep ourselves from getting upper respiratory infections is by keeping your mucous membranes moist, because when they become cracked and dry, that's one of the ways that viruses actually take hold. So making sure that you're drinking adequate fluids. There's so many simple things that people can be doing. And I'm not saying that this is a panacea and that no one will get sick with COVID-19 or influenza.
Reducing risk, doing what you can that are simple and effective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
All right, listen, I can tell I'm really hitting the end of my road here. So
Back to bed, patient.
I'm going back to bed. I'm going to take some fluids. I'm going to get the elderberry, Hydralyte, whatever. Dr. Kelly Victory, it is always a privilege. And I really like that the arc that you and I have been across as we've struggled to help people and understand this thing. I feel like we paid out a bunch of stuff today.
Okay, I'm also going to post what you took when you were sick.
Oh, somebody asked, what about N-acetylcysteine? What do you think about that?
Dak, there's been some great results on it. I haven't used it with
I haven't either.
personally. I have not, but it's relatively safe, and I don't think there's any downside to it. So I can't speak authoritatively about it, other than to say that anecdotally, I do have other physician colleagues who have tried it and used it with some success.
Bootyful, you're asking about how H1N1 compares with COVID. Watch our stream. We talked about it earlier. H1N1 was worse in the flu phase. This treacherous inflammatory phase is more dangerous with the COVID, and that's what gets away from people, and that's what needs to be treated early and aggressively. So we need to stay one step ahead of the inflammatory phase of this illness, or else you're in the hospital and you're in the ICU. And there's no reason for that with all the good treatments we have. That's the basic message in our thread today.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yep.
All right, Dr. Kelly Victory, I'm really got to go because I'm going to crash hard here in a second.
Okay.
If I get out of here.
And
So-
I'm on KABC for the doctor hour coming up. So
All right, great.
Check
Get
it
on
out
there.
at kbc.com, right? What is it at?
Yep, KABC.com. I'm on KABC from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific time. So you can listen live. And you can certainly find me on Twitter at Dr. Kelly Victory, or on my YouTube channel at Victory Health Inc. But I'm transitioning while you go back to bed and feel better, Dr. Drew.
Yeah, hopefully there's a bed made. It's gonna wash. He's gonna go sit on the
I have this strange things where I crave out of door. I crave air and stuff, so I lie down outside sometimes. It's fine too.
Yeah,
so.
he can.
Actually
Go sit
good
on. It's
for
a
you.
beautiful day in California.
Yeah, and sunshine is good. It
Thank
converts
you
that
so
vitamin
much,
D.
Kelly.
Yeah,
Thank
Kelly,
you, thank
best
you.
wishes. Happy New Year.
Drew's gonna be the drunk uncle and never leave. if
No,
you
we're going to
don't.
go now. Thank you. And thank you to everybody on the thread today. We appreciate it. Follow Kelly at Dr. Kelly Victory. And I may do a little Instagram update this afternoon. And we thank you guys for everything. And we'll see you tomorrow with a psychiatrist who believes.
Take a picture of the Dr. Drew's protocol during his COVID-19 illness. I'm gonna put that up.
Okay. And again, talk to an MD.com. What is it? Talk to
Speak with an MD.
Speak to an MD.com. You see, this is not working. Speak to an MD.com. Speak with an MD or speak to an MD?
With.
Speak with an MD.com. That's where you get telemedicine. Stay out of the hospital, everybody. And Andrew Ashkashvili, you just made my soul sink at those vaccine numbers. That's insane. We got to do better than that. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow with a psychiatrist. A psychiatrist who is going to tell us why we are all in a state of delusional psychosis. Very interesting.
Tomorrow.
Great.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Real talk,
Headlines have become it's sickening. They become poisonous.
dissecting headlines,
Defying state orders. Sheriff Bianco not enforcing what the governor is saying.
dialed in with decision makers.
Clarify what you actually meant.
Get the answers you
At
need.
the beginning of this, we were told, don't wear a mask. Is this really helping?
Expect a different kind of newscast. Fox 11 News Special Report. Weeknights at 7